Hello, so welcome back to this channel, and on today's video we're going to be talking about how to sign in with Google, and this whole process is going to be enabled with Firebase Authentication. So we all know that before we use most of the regular apps, there is always a need to either to sign up or to log in, and most of the time that could really be very daunting to keep registering on multiple sites. So in the end, you find out that there is always a button that makes it really easy for everyone, the sign in with Google button or even the login with Facebook button. So in this particular video, we are going to be going over how to sign in with Google, and how to do that is pretty straightforward. But before we get into the main thing, let's go ahead and see what we're going to build at the end of the day. So as you can see, there is a very simple application that we have here. So as you can see, it's very simple. We didn't pay so much attention to the user interface, so we just have one button. Alright, so let's say the user goes ahead and click on sign in with Google. So as you can see, this is going to generate a dialog, or is going to display all the Google accounts that has been logged in into your Android device. Currently I have two Gmail accounts logged into my Android emulator. So for instance, if I go ahead and select the first Gmail account, which is Ufinix Academy, so it means that I want to log in with that Gmail account. Boom, so as you can see, the login was successful, and what happens is that we're able to retrieve our display name, which in this regard is Ufinix, and also we're able to retrieve the email address, which is ufinixacademy@gmail.com. And also, let's say peradventure you might need a profile image for the app that you're building, you can also have access to the photo URL. You can easily grab that directly from the Gmail account as well. So this pretty comes in handy. It's also worthy of note that combining Firebase authentication to this makes it pretty seamless. It means that you can easily manage your user instance across your application. So now that we've seen exactly what we're going to build in this tutorial, if this looks pretty interesting, keep watching, but don't forget to hit the like button. And if this is your first time on this channel, consider subscribing and hitting the bell notification so that you don't get to miss any of the videos. So now let's get right into it. Okay, so we're gonna create a new project. So this is going to be an Android app. All right, so we're going to name this project login with Google. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on create. So it is going to be a blank app. So our project is being created. I'm very certain that everybody knows how to do this. Alright, so our project has been successfully created. Okay, so our project has been successfully created. Now the first thing we need to do would be to load up the layout file. Of course, we know that we're supposed to add a few text views and a single button, so we're gonna go ahead and do that pretty quickly. So our layout is loading. Okay, so our layout is fully loaded. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add the necessary button and text views. Alright, because this is very simple, we are not going to be spending a lot of time here, so I'm just going to go ahead and design it, and we're going to go over it together. So this is what our layout is going to look like. Firstly, we added a linear layout because the parent layout is a relative layout, and we added the button. The ID is sign in button, and we had the text view, display name test, and we added email test and photo URL test. These are all test views. So that's the only thing we had to do with the layout. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go to our main activity and connect or reference these views that we have here. Okay, so here in our main activity, the first thing we want to do will be to define the button and the test views. So we're going to define the sign in button. We're also going to define 3 different test views. Alright, so let's go ahead and reference these views. We actually don't need this, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. Alright, so let's go ahead and reference these views. Firstly, I'm going to reference the sign in button. So I'm very certain that we're very familiar with how to reference views. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the display name test, email test, and photo URL test. So when I say test, I'm actually referring to test views. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for email test and photo URL test. Now the next thing that we need to do will be to go ahead and install the necessary Nugget packages that will ensure that the login with button works appropriately just the way we expected. And there are actually 2 Nugget packages that we need to install. So we're going to go over to the Nugget Manager. You need to ensure that your computer is connected to the internet while doing this, because we're going to be downloading some packages. So most of my support libraries are outdated, so what I want to do will be to go ahead and update all of them first of all. This is to ensure that everything works appropriately. Okay, so the update is complete. So the first package we're going to install will be Google Play Services Authentication. So I'm going to search for Google Play Services.auth. Right, so this is the library that we want to install. So let's go ahead and install this. Okay, so I think there is some error. So let's go ahead and install support v4. So it seems support v4 is missing. So let's go ahead and install the latest version. So depending on when you're watching this video, so if you ever get that error, confirm that support v4 is well installed in your project. So after that, we can go back and search for Google Play Services.auth. So here it is. So let's go ahead and install this big boy. So this is actually what makes the whole authentication stuff to really be possible. So let's go ahead and install this. Okay, so the installation was successful. The next package we need to install will be Firebase Authentication. So we're going to have Firebase Auth. Okay, so this is the package that we're interested in. So let's go ahead and install this. Okay, so the installation was successful. Alright, now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and create a Firebase project. So to do that, I'm going to open up my Chrome. So you can easily go over to console.firebase.google.com. So here is the URL. So it's going to get you to a page like this. So why you're seeing all these different boxes is because I have other projects that I've worked on. So we're going to go ahead and create a new one. So the name of this project is going to be Login with Google. Alright, so let's go ahead and click on continue. Okay, so I want to disable Google Analytics because we actually don't need it for now. So our project is being created. Alright, so let's go ahead and click on continue. Okay, so this is what we see when we create a new Firebase project. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add an Android app to this project. So we're going to click on the Android icon. Alright, so this is where we are going to register the app. Firstly, we need to provide the app's package name. Now to have that, we need to go back to our Visual Studio. Alright, so we're going to click on projects. We're going to go to login with Google properties. So this is where we can get our package name. When you click on manifest, so this is our package name. Instead, I'm going to change the company name to Ufinix. So now we have com.ufinix.login with Google. So this is going to be our package name. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it here. Another very important thing that we need to provide will be the SHA-1 certificate. Alright. The next very important thing that we need to provide will be the SHA-1 certificate. Alright, so this is very important because we are working with Google Sign-ins. As you can see, it is required for some specific Google packages, and sign-in is one of them. So we need to find a way to provide it because we are using Xamarin, so to generate this becomes a lot easier for us. So one quick hack is to just go ahead and search this in Google. Just search debug sign-in key Xamarin. Just search this in Google. So one of the results is going to be finding your key store signature. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and open up this link. So this is one of the links in Xamarin's documentation, so it can help you to easily find your debug key store. And also I've made a video about this in the past, so I'm going to put the link, but let's just go over it pretty quickly without wasting time. So what we are required to do here is to run a key2 command in the folder containing the key2.exe. So the key2.exe is a file contained in our bin folder in the Java JDK folder. So this is the command that we need. So this command will go ahead and generate our SHA-1 fingerprint. So what we need to do will be to go ahead and copy this command. So now the next thing we need to do will be to find where our Java folder is located. So to do that, I'm going to open up my file explorer. So I'm going to go to my local disk. And there are two places that you could find this. First, if you go to your program files, So you're going to check if you have any folder that is named Java. So if you actually updated your Visual Studio version to the latest and you're using the latest Android support libraries, then this will be the same on your computer. So if you enter the programs files folder, you're going to find a folder named Android. So if you click on it, you're going to see another folder named JDK. So when you open the JDK, you're going to see Microsoft Distributable Open JDK. So this is the folder we are interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. So inside of the bin folder, we're going to see the key2.exe. So this is the file that we are referring to in this documentation, key2.exe. So the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and run this command. So to do that, I'm going to go to this search bar. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to use my backspace to clean it, and I'm going to type cmd. Alright, so this will go ahead and open a command prompt for us. So when this command prompt is open, what we need to do will be to go ahead and paste the command that we just copied from Microsoft documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this here. Boom. So as you can see, this is the SHA-1 fingerprint that we're looking for. So everyone usually cover this number up. I guess it's really very dangerous to show off this number. So I'm going to go ahead and cover mine as well. So now that we've copied that, we need to return to our Firebase console. And we're going to paste the SHA-1 fingerprint. Alright, so now let's go ahead and register our app. Okay, so the registration is obviously very successful. Now the next thing we need to do will be to download Google Services.json file. We're going to be needing this file later on in the class, so it's been properly downloaded. So we're going to return to our console. Now the next thing we need to do will be to click on authentication by the sidebar, and we need to set up a sign-in method, because Firebase Authentication presents you with a lot of different methods to be able to authenticate your users. You can use email and password, you can use phone, you can use Google, you can use Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo, GitHub, and the rest. But the one we are really interested in is with Google. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and provide our project name. So the project name is what the user is going to see when they're about to log into the app. So I'm going to change this to login with Google. So I'm going to go ahead and select my email address. So that's fine. Now the next thing we need to do will be this is optional. So we're going to be needing this shortly. But before then, let's go ahead and save this. Alright, so as you can see, Google doesn't want me to mislead people by naming my project login with Google. So I'm going to name this Ufinix login tutorial. So this is what we have as well. Okay, so now that we've gotten to this point, what we need to do will be to go ahead and enable this. Let's go ahead and click on save, and boom, everything is fine. Now we've successfully enabled the Google sign-in option. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and return to Visual Studio, and we need to go ahead and start implementing the sign-in with Google. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do will be to define a new Google sign-in options. So to do that, I'm going to go to the top and say Google sign-in option. Okay, so this doesn't exist. Let's go ahead and resolve this class. So I'm going to call this GSO. Now let's go ahead and reference this. So GSO is going to be equal to new sign-in option dot builder. So inside of the builder, we're going to pass it Google sign-in options dot default sign-in. Now the next thing we need to provide will be the request ID token. And this request ID token, we can get it from our Firebase console. So we're going to return to Firebase console. We're going to click on Google, and this is the request ID token. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to return to our project, and we're going to paste this here. Now the next thing we need to provide will be the request email, and we're going to go ahead and call build. So this is a standard way of defining our Google sign-in option. Now the next thing we need to do will be to define a new Google API client. So to do that, I'm going to go to the top as well. So I'm going to call this Google API client. Okay, so this is responsible for connecting to Google services. So that's why it's very useful. So we're going to go ahead and reference this. So this instance, we're going to call it Google API client. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and initialize this Google API client as well, just the way we did for the sign-in options. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and say Google API client. So this is going to be equal to new Google API client dot builder. Alright, so we're going to pass it this. Now the next thing we need to do will be to add the API we're interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and click .add. So the API that I want to add will be auth. Okay, so auth doesn't actually exist now, so let's go ahead and resolve this. So this is the auth that we are talking about, Android GMS auth.api. So when I have this, I'm going to click Google sign in API. So this is the API we're interested in. So we're going to pass this our Google sign in options, which is GSO. And the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and call the build method. Alright, so successfully set up our Google API client. The last thing we need to do here will be to go ahead and connect it. So I'm going to say Google API client.connect. Okay, so now that we successfully set up our sign-in options and our sign-in client, the next thing we need to do will be to add a click event handler for our sign-in button. So I'm going to say sign-in button.click. Alright, so this is when we'll start really signing the user in using Google. So this is at the point that we're going to create the intent that will go ahead and log in or sign in our user using his or her Google account. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and save our intent. This will be equal to auth Google sign-in API dot get sign-in intent. And here we're going to pass in our Google API client, which is this. Boom. Now finally, we're going to go ahead and start an activity with this intent. So we're going to say start activity for results, because this is going to be happening on a new activity. So we need to pass it this intent, and we need to wait for result as well. And we're going to use one as the request code. Bam. So this is basically how we are going to start the signing process. To verify that the intent is showing up, let's go ahead and run our app on an emulator, so we can confirm that we are on our way to really signing in our users using Google. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on sign in with Google and see what happens. Alright, so the pop-up is coming up. You need to ensure you're connected to the internet, and boom. So as you can see, we have the interface that is telling us continue to log in with Google, and this is exactly what we want to see at this point. So it means that we are on the right track. So if we click on any of these accounts, nothing happens for now because we've not written the code yet. So let's go ahead and continue with that. Now the next thing we need to do will be to initialize our Firebase. So there's actually a very quick way and a very certain way of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new method. So this method is going to return an instance of Firebase Authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and say public Firebase Auth. So let's go ahead and resolve this. So I can actually change this to private. I think it's better. Firebase Auth. So I'm going to call this method get Firebase Auth. So what we intend to do here is to initialize Firebase. So far so good. I've noticed that adding the Google services.json to our projects doesn't actually initialize Firebase. So there is actually a very good way of doing this that you can always hit your chest and be very certain that your Firebase is going to initialize. So that's the method that we're going to be using. So I use it in all my Firebase related tutorials. So we're going to define an app. So it is going to be Firebase app. So let's go ahead and resolve this. Okay, so we're going to have Firebase app.initialize app. I'm going to pass it this as a context. So I'm going to define an instance of Firebase Authentication. So I'm going to have Firebase auth. I can easily call this mauth. Alright, now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and say if app is equal to null, which it will be null most of the times. Now what we need to do here is to define a new Firebase option. So I'm going to have options. So if you're already very familiar with the process, I'm going to put timeline dots in the video description So you can just skip this process and get to the point where we really signed in the user and also went ahead to retrieve the details. So let's go ahead and continue. So it is going to be new Firebase options, the builder. Alright. So the things that we need to provide will be the project ID. So I'm going to say set project ID. So where are we going to get this project ID? Of course, we are going to get it from the Google Services JSON file we just downloaded. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and open this file. Alright, so the project ID is this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it. Now we're going to return to Visual Studio and we're going to paste it. Now the next thing we need to provide will be the application ID, which is also the same thing as the project ID. So I'm going to paste this here. Now the next thing we need to provide will be the API key. So I'm going to say set API key, and we need to return back to our JSON file. So, and this is the API key, current key. So that's the key that we are referring to. So we're going to go ahead and copy this as well. We're going to paste this in Visual Studio as the API key. Now the next thing we need to provide will be the database URL. So let's go and copy the URL. So as you can see, Firebase URL is the same thing as database URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So I'm going to paste this here. Now the last thing that we need to copy will be the storage bucket. So let's go ahead and copy the storage bucket. So this storage bucket is also very important. So we're going to copy it. We're going to have .set storage bucket. Alright. And finally, we're going to go ahead and build it by calling the build method. Now the next thing we need to do will now be to go ahead and say app will be equal to Firebase app dot initialize app. So we're going to pass it this and the Firebase options, which in this regard is options. Alright, so this will certainly initialize our Firebase. And finally, we can now go ahead and say mauth is equal to Firebase auth dot instance. Okay, so if by any means it happens that our app got to initialize at this point, we're going to use an else statement. So here I can easily say mauth will be equal to Firebase auth dot instance. Okay, and finally we're going to go ahead and return mauth. So if any of this is kind of confusing to you, it means that you probably might need to revisit the basics, but not to worry because we have a very wonderful course on it that teaches you everything you need to know to become a world-class Android developer using Xamarin. So I'm going to put the link to the course in the video description. So let's continue. So at this point, we can now go ahead and initialize our Firebase. So the next thing we need to do will be to define a global instance of Firebase Authentication. Firebase auth. So I'm going to call this FireAuth. Alright. So here, FireAuth is going to be equal to get Firebase auth. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and really sign in the user with Google using Firebase. So to do that, we're going to go to the sign in button on click event handler, which is at this point. What we've successfully done is to send the user to go and choose which account that he actually wants to use to sign into the app. Now the next thing we need to do will be to override on activity result. So I'm going to say override on activity result. So this is the method that executes when the user returns after selecting which account that he wants to use to log in into the app. So what I'm going to do will be to check the request code. We all know that we passed 1 as the request code to this activity when we started it. So I'm going to say if request code is equal to 1. So this will confirm that this is the request that we created. So the next thing we need to do will be to define a new Google sign-in result. So I'm going to say Google sign-in results. So I'm going to call this result. So this will be equal to auth dot get sign-in result from intent. And we're going to pass it the data that we received back from this intent. Now the next thing we need to do will be to verify that the sign-in was successful. So to do that, I'm going to say if result dot is success. So if this is true, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and grab the sign-in account. So I'm going to say Google sign-in account. So this will give us the instance of the account that the user wants to use to sign in. So this will be equal to result the sign-in account. So we've successfully retrieved the account that the user wants to use to sign in into this app. Now the next thing we need to do will be to create a method. So I'm going to call this method login with Firebase. And this method is going to take in a parameter. The parameter is going to be an account. That's the Google sign-in account. So let's go ahead and generate this method. Alright, so what happens here is that after we successfully retrieve the Google sign-in account, the next thing we want to do is to tell Firebase to authenticate this user using this Google account. So that's why we have to create this method to make things really explicit and easy for anyone to understand. So the first thing we want to do here will be to get the credentials of this account. So I'm going to go ahead and save our credentials. So this is going to be equal to Google Auth Provider get credentials, and we're going to pass it our account .id token. And the access token is null because we don't have that. So this successfully will go ahead and get the credentials that we can now authenticate with Firebase. So we're going to go ahead and say Firebase Auth, which is an instance of Firebase authentication that we created earlier, .sign in with credentials, and we're going to go ahead and pass it the credentials, and this is credentials. Bam. So this is how to basically authenticate this user with Firebase by making use of the credentials. Now the final step will be to verify whether this sign-in using Firebase was successful or not. So to do that, we're going to add on success listener and on failure listener. So I'm going to go ahead and say .add on success listener. So on success listener will actually tell us when the sign-in was successful. Because this is an interface, we are going to implement this interface in this class. And finally, we need to add on failure listener as well. So I'm going to have add on failure listener, and this interface will be implemented in this activity. And that's all we need to do. So as you can see, this is still bringing errors because we've not implemented this interface. As you can see, it takes in I on success listener. So to do that, we're going to scroll up to the beginning part of our code. So this is the point we need to go ahead and implement the interface. I'm going to have I on success listener. So I know the tutorial is getting pretty long, so I'm going to try to really be quick. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for failure listener. Alright, so let's go ahead and implement this interface. Implement the interface and implement the interface. So this will go ahead and create two different methods for us on success and on failure. So when the signing was successful, this method is going to execute, and if the authentication failed, this method is going to execute, but most of the time it won't fail. So after the user has successfully signed in, we want to be able to retrieve the display name, the email address, and the photo URL in case we want to download the image and make use of it as a profile image. So this is the point we can do all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and say display name test.test. This will be equal to Firebase auth.current user.display name. So this will go ahead and give us the name of the user that just logged in. Then email test.test. This is going to be also equal to Firebase auth.current user.email. And finally, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for photo URL. Okay, so we're going to add the path as the path to where the image is saved. Boom. So this is basically all we need to do here. So I made a mistake. Okay, so I went ahead to add more like a descriptive text, so we can now know that this is display name, email, and photo URL. Alright, so and after that I'm going to shoot a toast to tell us that the login was successful. Okay, so this is all that we need to do. So to verify that the login is going to be successful, now let's go ahead and run our app. Okay, so here we have it. Now let's go ahead and click on sign in with Google. Alright, so the pop-up is coming up. Alright, so let's go ahead and select Ufinix. So what we expect to happen here is that we'll get the name, and we'll get the email address, and we'll get the URL for the photo. So let's go ahead and select Ufinix. It takes a few seconds, so you might want to use a progress bar in between just to communicate to the user that something is happening, and bam, login is successful. So as you can see, we now have the name Ufinix, and we have the email address Ufinix Academy, and this is the photo URL. So guys, this is simply how to sign in with Google. But the last part of the thing that we need to do is to now fix the UI. So whenever a user is signed in as it is, what we're supposed to be seeing on this button is supposed to be sign out. And when the user has been signed out, we're supposed to change the text that we have on the button to sign in with Google. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. Alright, so to do that, I'm going to have to create a new method. So this method, I'm going to call it update UI. I'm going to have void update UI. So what we want to do here is to first of all confirm if the user is signed in or not. So to do that, I'm going to say if Firebase auth, the current user, is not equal to null. So this condition means that the user is signed in. So the sign in button, the test, is going to be equal to sign out. This means that the user is not signed in yet. So I'm going to go ahead and say sign in button, the test. It should be equal to sign in with Google. So let's go ahead and make use of this method. The first place that we're going to be using this method is when the login failed. So for adventure, if anything happened and the login was not successful, so we're going to go ahead and update the UI, and we'll also shoot a toast that login failed. The next place we need to use this method is when the login was successful. So after this toast, we're going to go ahead and update our UI. Now the other place that we need to make use of this method is when the app just started, right? So if the app started and the user is currently still logged in, we need to update the UI so that we can be able to know what we need to do, whether to sign out or to sign in again. So I'm going to go ahead and update UI here. And also another place that we need to use the update UI is in the sign in button click. So at this point, so when a user is currently signed in, this button should not go ahead and sign us in again. Instead, it should enable us to be able to sign out. So we're going to use a simple if statement to do that. So we're going to say if Firebase auth, the current user, is equal to null. So this means that no user is signed in. So we're going to copy this code and put it in the first if block. And finally, if no user is signed in, we need to go ahead and sign out. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and say Firebase auth.sign out. Alright, so this will go ahead and sign out the user. And after signing out, we need to also update the UI so that we'll now know exactly what we need to do. So this is basically all that we need to do at this moment. I need to update the UI too here. Bam. So guys, let's verify that everything works exactly as it should be in a real world scenario. So if a user is still logged in when we launch our app, the button that usually should have told us to sign in with Google, we say sign out. Alright, so our app is fully loaded, and as you can see, it's telling us to sign out. So we can now go ahead and click on sign out. Boom, and we're out. So if we want to sign in again, we can go ahead and click on sign in with Google. So as you can see, it automatically signed us in with the previous option that we selected before. Bam. So as you can see, it previously signed us in using the email address that we originally selected in the past. So in that way, we don't have to go ahead and make the choice again. So when we sign out, it signs out. When we sign in, instead of we having to select a choice, it just goes ahead and uses our former choices. So guys, this is exactly how to go about logging in with Google using Firebase. So if you really learned something new and you found this video really interesting, don't forget to hit the like button And if this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you can always get notified whenever I make this kind of video. So guys, thank you very much for watching and catch you later.